Hello, everyone, and welcome to the divisional round of the 2023 NFL season. Now that we're in 2024, that makes sense. Anyway, Doug Farrar here from USA Today Sports Media Group and Touchdown Wire, and the guy over there is Greg Cosell, the well-lit Greg Cosell of NFL Films and ESPN's NFL Matchup. And Greg, it's the divisional round. We got a lot of notes, so let's just get rolling here.
Jump into it, Doug. Jump
Yeah.
into it.
Before we get started, we do a Tuesday phone call to kind of get the scene set for our Wednesday video. And you always bring up interesting things. And you mentioned, and I wanted to just get into this quickly before we get into the games, how teams scheme things up differently in the playoffs, because now everyone's in the building and it's far more opponent specific than it might be in the season. If you could just expand on that and kind of tell our viewers / listeners how NFL teams might be doing things differently now that they're preparing for playoff games.
Well, obviously you can't reinvent the wheel in a week, So what you've been doing since you started OTAs, that's still the foundation of everything you do. But you now have more people involved in preparation and game planning, because what a lot of teams do, I would say most teams, they bring in their scouts, they're in the building, they're going through specific things. There's more specialized game planning. There's more specialized research, depending on what the staff thinks is necessary for that particular opponent. You never want to leave any stone unturned. You never know what down or distance or play call or approach is going to be the one that has a major effect on the game. So, you never want to be, I don't want to use the word surprised, because surprised is not quite the word. Because I've had conversations with quarterbacks who've played in the league for 15 years, and I say to them, were you ever surprised by what a defense showed you? And pretty much the answer I got was no, I wasn't surprised. Yeah. So it's not a matter of, wow, they're doing something that is just we never saw before. It's just getting to things a little bit differently. It's more nuance, it's more detail, it's more subtlety than it is we're changing everything we do, because you can't do that. You may decide based on the opponent that, hey, you know what? We want to play a higher percentage of zone coverage this week than man coverage, even though we're a man team. We may decide, hey, you know what? We've got to specifically match up to the tight end this week. And you know what? We're going to do it with X player on our defense, because we need to do that this week. Those kinds of things. But that's what teams do, because right now, look, every team wants to win every week in the league, but there's no question that everything is heightened in the playoffs because it's one and done.
Yeah, I would say that if your quarterback answers that question with, yes, I am surprised a lot, you probably aren't in the playoffs anyway.
And you probably didn't play quarterback for 15 years in the NFL.
No. Well, and there's also like the Dolphins. I mean, they were down like all their edge rushers are signing guys off the street. So Fangio went with a bunch more zero blitzes than anyone expected. And, Vic Fangio's an idiot. You can't blitz Mahomes. Well, what the hell else is he supposed to do? Just sit there and wait for Mahomes to complete passes?
Yeah, and he probably didn't have a feel for his players and what they could do. I mean, obviously some of these guys have been in the league, but they haven't been with him. Right. So, he took an approach that, I don't want to say it's an easy approach, but obviously if you're going to blitz like that, there's still gaps and lanes and all that. You're not just saying to 6 or 7 guys, just go randomly. Yeah. But he felt that was the best approach. See, that's the thing that always I find intriguing. Then we'll get to the games. The thing I find intriguing is, coaches, they do this all the time. Okay. Mm-hmm. They sit around, and this is what I love about it, the process. I wish I could be in the room, and they spend so much time trying to figure this out. Does it always work? Of course not. It doesn't always work, but that doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing or they're stupid. I mean, this is what these guys do. Sometimes you go with the plan that you think will be the best plan for your opponent. And also what we don't know, we can glean it at times, but what we don't know is what they know about their own players. Right. So, it's easy for an outsider to say, oh, well, they should have done this, or why aren't they doing? Well, they may know that a player or players can't do certain things, so they can't do those things, even if they seem like obvious things to do. You see that a lot with quarterbacks. People always wonder, well, why aren't they doing that? Well, they're with that quarterback every single day. They know him inside and out, mentally and physically. And more than likely, they're asking him to do what he's capable of doing well, and they're not asking him to do what they know that he can't do particularly well.
Right. And it can be as simple as, and this is a hypothetical, but let's say you replace Jalen Phillips, who's injured, with Justin Houston, which the Dolphins kind of did. And maybe Houston's best move is an inside counter. Maybe Phillips's best move is an outside sort of dip and rip and release, that kind of motorcycle lean. Let's just say you have two different kinds of
Right.
and it could be, this guy's better inside, this guy. Well, that changes the entire way your line reacts.
Of course. That changes the way you line up with your front.
Yes, Christian
Yeah.
Wilkins in it with a guy with a better inside counter. He may do more TT stunts because you have the inside covered. So now I can go this way. It could be one little domino and the whole thing just changes.
The whole thing gets changed.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Yep.
so there's so much, to that. And obviously that stuff's hard to talk about because, that's clinic type stuff.
Right. And we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know what Vic Fangio thinks about Justin Houston versus Jalen Phillips. But as the Dolphins, sad for the Dolphins, are out of the playoffs, let's get into the teams that are still around. Survivor pool of 8. And we'll start with the Houston Texans at the Baltimore Ravens. We're going to talk about regular season rematches in 2 of these games, but here the week 1 rematch doesn't mean a lot. That was CJ Stroud's first NFL game, Bobby Slowick's first game as his OC. Stroud completed 28 of 44 passes for 242 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, pass rating of 78.0. Stroud kept everything underneath. He attempted 2 passes of 20 or more air yards, completing neither, or neither, whichever. Either. Since week 2, as I'm sure you know, Greg, Stroud has completed 35 of 59 deep passes for a league-high 1,213 yards, 9 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a league-high passer rating of 143.2. So this is a different and exponentially better Stroud. The Ravens are obviously aware of that. All their defenders have been asked the same, what CJ Stroud do you see now? And they all say the same thing. He's better, but we still need to beat him. But that's just where it is. So week 1, Ravens Texans, I don't really glean a lot from that.
No, I don't. I agree with that. And I think this is a fascinating matchup on that side of the ball because, I think what Mike McDonald has done with that defense is really, really good. They've got a lot of really important players. Like I would argue that the 3 most important players on that Ravens defense are the 2 linebackers, Queen and Smith, and the safety Hamilton.
Yes.
And Hamilton essentially is their slot corner a good percentage of the time. Now, every once in a while, they'll go to a more conventional nickel and play Millette at slot corner and keep Hamilton at safety. But Hamilton, for the most part, has been their slot corner over the last part of the season. They've gotten really good play up front from specific individuals. You and I have talked about Matabuke. We don't need to go over that again. Just know that he can line.
It's my weekly Justin Matabuke fan club.
Yeah, he lines up predominantly inside, but there are times they line him up as a wide 9, and he's shown the ability to do that. Clowney's had the best year of his career as a pass rusher.
Yes.
Van Noy is still a factor in multiple ways. Just a really good football player who can do a lot of things for you.
They'll use him like Belichick used him, as the
to some degree. To some degree,
not all the time, but he'll be lined up in a 3-tech alignment.
But he also rushes the quarterback, and he's done that pretty well this year from an edge position.
Yep.
And those 2 linebackers, as I said, and Hamilton are critical pieces. And they're not a high percentage blitz defense. People who think that, it's the same as Wink Martindale, it's not. They're not a high percentage blitz defense. They're selective blitz defense, and when they do it, they're very, very good at it. So this is a challenge. One of the things that the Texans do have going for them is their left tackle Tunsil is one of the 2 or 3 best in one-on-one pass protection. So they don't necessarily need to worry about helping him.
Let's talk about what he did against Myles Garrett. Wow.
Yeah, no, he's a really good player. So so that really helps them because obviously the last thing that offensive coaches want to do, and certainly Bobby Slowick, who comes from the background of let's get 5 out, is have to keep people in either as primary pass protectors or even as chippers. He doesn't really want to do that. No. And Tunsil obviously is a guy that you don't have to worry about that. So there's a really intriguing matchup on this side. Collins has really come on as a really strong boundary X. He's tall. He's a strider. He's athletic. He eats up ground. He's shown very good run after catch. He can run away from man coverage. One of the things they've done well, and Collins has been a big part of that, is they've handled cover one well because they run a lot of crossers, and he can run away from coverage and crossers as the underneath. You see a lot of post cross type combinations. He runs the crossers and he runs away from coverage. So that's an advantage for
Crossers
them.
and quick and intermediate outs. Those outs to
Yeah,
Collins have been just devastating all year.
yeah. So I mean, it's a good matchup on that side of the ball.
Yeah, the Ravens do not have a specific coverage type, unlike the Browns, who are heavy, cover one.
Right.
The Ravens this season, they run single high coverage on 46.4% of their snaps, two high, 53.3. It's been cover three, cover four, cover one, cover six in that order. And it doesn't really change a lot on third down. Like they don't, oh God, it's
No.
passing down. We have to do X, Y, Z. You don't know what you're going to get from snap to snap. They do all of it well, and they're very adept with coverage switches. So it is multiplicity from front to back, and they can pretty much do anything they want.
No, it's a tough defense to play against. And of course, on the other side of the ball, everybody's talked about Lamar, and deservedly so, but they still lead the league in rushing by a wide margin. And obviously, Lamar was their leading rusher because they lost Dobbins early in the year, so they kind of pulled it all together with Edwards, who always seems to have a good year for them. At the end of every year, it seems like the guy has 750 yards, averaging 5 yards a rush.
He can break off some gains.
Yeah, and then Hill has been an important player for them. So their run game is still problematic. They get to the red zone a lot, and they score touchdowns when they get to the red zone, and that's where the Lamar running factor really, really comes into play.
Yep. Now, the Texans are generally more two high than single high. They run a lot of cover 4 or 6. Not a surprise because of D'Amico Ryan's history. Lamar has 5 of his 20. I had to look at this 3 or 4 times. Like, is this true? Lamar has 5 of his 24 touchdown passes this season against two high, and 2 of his 5 interceptions.
Yeah, that I don't. What I do know is what the Texans' defense is they're more of an execution-based defense than a heavily schemed defense. Not high percentage blitz. Do not play a lot of man. As you said, you'll see a lot of too high. They will do some late coverage rotation, but they're not one of those heavily schemed defenses where you're not sure what you're going to see. They're not trying to. I don't want to say fool. That's not the right word, but they don't spend a lot of time with confusion in what they do. Where they will match Stingley on the best receiver a good part of the time, so he'll play both sides. But even when they do that, it's not necessarily man, although they do have lock principles. Every team has a different name for, when they play zone, but they lock the boundary X receiver with a corner. The Texans will do that with Stingley. He's clearly their best cover corner. I think they've gotten really good play from people who are probably not known players. The linebacker Cashman has shown up on tape all year. Since they got Derek Barnett, he has been a factor as an edge pass rusher.
Yes.
Anderson and Grenard are really good players. Anderson is not a bendy guy, but he's really strong, and his speed to power rush is a problem. Grenard's bendier than Anderson, and he's shown up a lot this year. So, and inside, they've got guys who've been in the league for a lot of years and have always been solid players inside. Rankins, Collins.
Yeah.
They're getting really good play from Davis. So they have good players. They're just not a defense, which maybe in this matchup serves them well, that they're probably an assignment-oriented defense, a do-your-job kind of defense, more than a defense that relies on a lot of schematics. And I think that's always important when you play Lamar.
Yeah, I was going to say that may work to their advantage as opposed to, hey, we're going to get all tricky, and the Ravens are getting all tricky, and someone's going to blow a gap at some point.
Right.
Boom. I found this interesting, and I watched all 10 of these plays. Lamar's 10 explosive runs this season, only 1 came against too high, 12-yarder against the Jaguars in week 15. Most of the time when he's taken off, it's against cover 3, which is, you go back to like how Colin Kaepernick used to just demolish too high against the Packers in all those games. But Lamar has been more prone to get explosive runs out of too high, so that's interesting. My notes on Grenard: leads the team with 14 sacks. Fast guy off the edge with a great knack of using rips and violent hands to disengage from blockers. And he is generally the pass rusher to the side of the left tackle, so he has won some high-profile matchups.
Without question. He's a very good player. And
Yeah,
like I said, he's more flexible than Anderson. Anderson has great strength, but
right.
Grenard can flatten his rush path at the top of the pass rush arc. Anderson can't really do that. Anderson wins with power.
And he times his hands really well. Like when the blocker gets his hands on him, he does one of those little quick, mosquito swat things.
Oh
And
yeah, that's his thing. Playing off Anderson plays off contact very well.
yes,
That's his game.
that's a better way to put it than mosquito swat thing. But I digress. So that's a fascinating matchup. Green Bay Packers and San Francisco 49ers. The Niners are another team without a coverage type. They've played 50% single high, two high 50% of the time. Cover three, cover four, cover one, then cover two in that order. They will flip to a bit more single high on third down, but as is the case with the Ravens, they play what works for them and they don't change a lot from a systemic point in a situational sense. Um, so we'll see what that means. Now, Green Bay's defense, under the much maligned Joe Barry, has engineered quite the turnaround over the last 3 weeks. From weeks 1 through 16, the Packers allowed an opponent completion rate of 66, 20 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, and an opponent pass rating of 96.6. In the last 2 weeks of the regular season, they allowed a completion rate of 60.4%, fifth best in the league, one touchdown, one interception, and an opponent pass rating of 79.5, 11th best in the league. Now, this was against the Vikings with their 12th quarterback and the Bears, which,
Right.
Dak Prescott threw for 403 yards and 3 touchdowns in the wild card round, but he also threw 2 interceptions and got out of there with a pass rating of 89.8.
Yeah, that was garbage time stuff.
Yeah. So, and you made a couple, I saw a couple of your notes on the Packers' defensive game plan focused on coverage, not pressure. They only rushed 5 or more on 9 of Prescott's 70 on Prescott's dropbacks, and they played a high percentage of 2 high coverage against Cowboys. So
And it
just
could have been a function of the game as well. So we don't know. I would, again, when you play the 49ers, your starting point is the run game. Obviously Purdy is a great player, and we've talked about him, but the starting point's the run game. So you have to decide how you want to defend the run game. Obviously, they're really good running to the left. That's what they do very well. And while the higher percentage of McCaffrey runs come out of 21 personnel, so you would expect that the Packers would be in their base, which is a 5-2 basically. McCaffrey also leads the NFL with a meaningful number of runs now, out of 11 personnel. And they get their wide receivers involved as blockers exceptionally well. And I think that's an important part of their run game.
So, is there anything you've seen from the Packers in the last 3 weeks where you think, oh, this is why it's sort of gotten better?
No, I wouldn't. No, I mean, I can't answer that specifically. I will say when I watch the Packers, I think their front's pretty good.
Mhm.
They've got 2 good edge players in Smith and Gary, and Van Ness has been getting more snaps, the rookie, and he's actually flashed. I think they have some really strong inside players. We know about Kenny Clark. Carl Brooks, 94, has played really well for them.
Can I say I loved his college tape because it's not often that you see a 300-pound edge rusher, and that's where he played most of his snaps. That was fascinating to me.
Yeah, and he's an inside player for them. And Devontae Wyatt has been playing more snaps now, and he's been playing better. So I think their front's pretty good. And Walker and Campbell, solid linebackers, big, athletic. Don't forget their secondary this year has gone through a ton of injuries. They're playing with a lot of guys that they didn't believe they would be playing with. So again, that takes time. They play a lot of zone. They're not a heavy man-to-man coverage team. In playing zone, people might think that's easy. Just, I got this area. It's not. You have to understand receiver distribution, splits, routes that come from all that, when to pass a guy on, when to carry him. I mean, there's a lot that's involved there. And when you're playing with young players, that can be difficult. So they've struggled at times throughout the year. Clearly, they had a stretch where it seemed like they couldn't stop anybody in the pass game playing zone. But, obviously they're going to have to be pretty good this week, or it's going to be a tough day at the office.
Real quick, we've talked about Purdy a lot. Just his kind of thumbnail, his attributes, especially rare for such a young quarterback, and how they work against this defense.
I think there's 2 things that he does exceptionally well. I think number one is he's a true anticipation thrower, meaning he will deliver the football to space before receivers begin their breaks.
How many times this year have we talked about in our previews Oh, last week Purdy hit this, in cut to Ayuk 23 yards downfield, and he threw it before Ayuk even made his cut.
Correct. I think, I think that's innate. I've had a lot of conversations with people. I think that's innate. I don't think you can point that out to a quarterback. You can say, hey, this is when you should throw it. But if you don't see it like that, you're not going to throw it because it's a scary throw to throw it to an area where the receiver is not. I mean, so I'm being honest. That's a hard thing to do. He's very good at that. And by the way, that pass offense demands that. That's the way they play pass offense. I'm not sure a lot of people realize how many throws in that offense are between the numbers where there are more bodies, and those are difficult NFL throws. The other thing that we had no idea about watching his college tape, and I'm sure it's one reason he was Mr. Irrelevant, besides the fact that he's obviously not physically imposing, doesn't have a power arm, all the trait stuff. But the other sort of mental part of his game, which you don't have to see in college, because very few colleges do this, is he is so good at dealing with late coverage rotation. I mean, he sees it in a heartbeat and registers and processes it like that. And don't forget, he has a second to process that. I sit with a clicker, I can watch the play 10 times. He's got a second to process it, and he does an unbelievable job of processing late coverage rotation and then knowing immediately where to go with the football based on his route concept and combinations. And, you don't see that much. You certainly didn't see that in the Big 12.
No. Yeah, I'll just say, I'll go back and watch a really interesting play like 10 times. Okay, what was the safety doing? What was the underneath guy doing? What was the By then, you're sacked 14 times and you lost.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to see that in less than a second.
Yep. Crazy.
So I mean, they're a difficult offense to play against. Obviously they play a lot out of 21 personnel, probably 40 to 45% of their snaps, but they also have great success out of 11, obviously throwing and running. And the way they use Debo and McCaffrey, you have to kind of figure out how you want to deal with that. You don't want to get caught up in too many adjustments and too much communication because, one guy gets out of position and you have a problem.
And positioning is a problem because they have so many. It's McCaffrey, it's Samuel, it's now Ayuk, it's certainly Kittle, where these guys can all line up at 4 or 5 different places.
Correct.
Formation, and they can kick your ass from any of those places. And it's 4 or 5 guys.
Right. And the beauty of that and the genius of it is they can line up in all those different spots, but the concepts are all the same. They just get to it from so many different ways.
Yep. Okay, here's a game we will be discussing a rematch. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Detroit Lions. In Week 6 against the Lions, a 20-6 Detroit win, Baker Mayfield completed 19 of 37 passes for 206 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a passer rating of 56.8. Probably the worst game of the season for him, at least statistically for sure. My notes on this, Greg, I don't know what you think. He was frequently speeding up in the pocket, whether he was hurt or not. Didn't throw with good base fundamentals, and he threw off platform more than he needed to, which led to a lot of incompletions against tight coverage. He had a wide open shot to Trey Palmer with 2 minutes left in the first half. He overthrew by a couple yards. Would have been an easy touchdown if he stayed within himself. That was a deep over from the slot against cover 4, and Palmer beat safety Kirby Joseph over the top. Mayfield did have defensive tackle Benito Jones pressuring him right when he threw the ball. But as we like to say, Greg, that's kind of a throw you need to make in the National Football League. He was pressured on 13 of his 41 dropbacks in that game. He completed 2 of 10 passes for 17 yards and a sack. For the season, Mayfield has been good against the blitz and good against pressure for the most part. It's not as if he's a complete disaster under pressure, and Dave Canales does some good things to keep him protected, as we've discussed before. So maybe that game was an oddity, but it presented most of the things about Mayfield over the years that tend to give you pause.
Yeah, and I think they've increased their shotgun the snaps over the course of the season. I think they realize that that's where he's most comfortable. Certainly he played that way in college, under Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. So that's where he's most comfortable. You're right. He missed some throws in that game. I don't think you can use that as a template for what's going to happen in this game. I think their run game is far better now. It's not great, but I think it's a meaningful part of their offense. Keep in mind that, and then people might not be aware of this, Rashad White had the second most carries of any back in the NFL this year. I don't think people are aware of that.
I did not
So
know that myself.
yeah, so I mean, and he only averaged 3.6, but the early part of the season, I don't think he was averaging 2 yards a carry. So their run game, it's part of what they do. There's a volume to it. It matters now in the context of their offense. And as I said, they've done a lot more with shotgun because that's you're playing to your quarterback's comfort level. You have to play to what makes your quarterback comfortable because if he's not comfortable, you're not likely to have a lot of offensive success. We know that what they do with their receivers. Godwin is an inside-outside guy. Evans is their boundary X, but they will go 3-by-1 or 1-by-3 because Otten can line up as the single receiver, and then Evans can be number 2 or number 3 to trip. So they do have some distribution and location versatility. So it's an offense that's grown throughout the course of the season. And you're right about Baker, though. The thing about Baker is he's at his core, he's a rhythmic thrower. And the longer he has to stay in the pocket, the less comfortable he is, and he starts to get a little frenetic. So, because he's not really a runner. I mean, he's not immobile. Like, can he get a first down here and there? Yeah, but he's not a true second reaction playmaker. He's not that guy. So
You need to keep out of pressure because that's when things start to, the gears just start to fall off the machine.
yeah, he starts to play fast,
Yep.
mentally and physically.
Yep.
And that's when he starts making some poor ball placement throws, the occasional interception. Hasn't thrown many this year, but every once in a while he'll force one when he starts to play a little faster. But I think overall Dave Canales has done an outstanding job with him. That offense does have a pretty good feel to it right now.
Yeah, and Baker's played well more often than not. This isn't like a Nathan Peterman disaster.
No, he's
Just
played
once in a
well.
while. Once
I
in a
mean,
while.
numbers are numbers. To me, they don't mean a lot.
Right.
But the reality is he's thrown 28 touchdowns and only 10 picks. And I think a lot of people have probably thought of him over the years as kind of an interception magnet. And and he hasn't been that.
No. Todd Bowles said this week that against the Eagles, he was convinced that running 6-man fronts was the thing to do.
God, they ran a ton of it.
They did. I thought the whole game was goal line. And then Bowles mentioned that against the Eagles, he wanted Dave Canales to get the passing game in attack mode. And just an overarch, before we get into the Lions, that's where the Bucs are as an organization right now. They're confident in design and execution. I'm not saying this is an automatic win. It really isn't. But that's where they are right now. They're not the team they were in week 6.
No, but the Lions are pretty good.
Whoo boy. Well, let's get into that. Goff with 12 personnel versus what the Bucs can do against it. Did you see any? I'm sure because we discussed last week how awesome Goff has been with heavy personnel, especially with Dan Skipper as a 6th OL. Did the Bucs when they went into heavy personnel, did the Buccaneers do anything specific to sort of array their defenses against it?
Well, the Lions are going to line up in 12. And they're going to run play action with Goff under center from 12 personnel, and they're going to do that on first down. And it'll be interesting to see what the Bucs do from a personnel standpoint. I don't believe they'll be in a 6-2 front in this game. No. I don't believe they'll play with 3 defensive backs against this group. Even when there's 12 personnel. That was specific to the Eagles. The question is, what will he do? Will he still stay base, base being a 5-2 and playing with 4 defensive backs? Or will there be times just based on tendency and field location and things of that nature where he'll think, hey, yes, they're in 12, but they're going to throw the ball. I mean, the last time they played, throwing on first down at a 12 was clearly a game plan. 67% of the throws out of 12 personnel came on first down in that week 6 game. And they're well aware of this. So the question is, are there going to be some first down snaps where he might line up in nickel? This is the chess match that, the tendency part of being specific to your opponent now that we just don't know. We also know that play action under center is a huge part of what the Lions do. Goff has thrown the most play action passes of any quarterback in the league this year, and like 90% of them have come with him under center.
Yeah, he has by far the most under center play action attempts by far.
Yeah, by far.
Second, I believe, but he's way up there.
And then where are you looking to attack in your play action pass game out of 12? What areas of the field? That's an important important consideration for the Bucs defense. They don't want to void certain areas if that's where they attack. I mean, they attack with, the flats, the hooks, the inbreakers, screens. They didn't really take deep shots out of it. But they will throw those inbreakers. That's a big deal. Goff's really good at those throws. So, you have to try to figure that out, because that's what you're going to get from the Lions.
Well, under center play action, we had a long discussion about this, like 10 minutes. It was really cool. I felt like it was at a coaching clinic. Goff, when pressured this season, passer rating of 62.1. When he's blitzed, passer rating of 94.9. So we need to delineate the difference between blitzing and pressure. Now, the under center play action thing, as we've discussed, obviously you're turning your back to the defense. When you flip around, now you're going to see a totally different coverage picture more often than you ever would in any other era of the NFL, because coverage switches are so much more a thing. In week 6, just on my study, Bowles threw a lot of disguise and late movement at Goff. Single too high a ton.
He handled it.
Yeah, he did. The Buccaneers sent 6 or more pass rushes against Goff 3 times. He completed all 3 attempts for 45 yards, screens in which his receivers were able to thrive after the catch. But Goff did not seem to be affected at all by Bowles' coverage switches, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah. And one of the things I think that the film showed is I think that when you talk about the Bucs D, I think their coverage just appeared to be somewhat more dependent on formation rather than down or situation, which a lot of teams do. I mean, you go 3-by-1 on as an offensive formation. A team will show a certain, tendency coverage. You go 2-by-2, they might show a different tendency coverage. So I think that can be pretty common. But yeah, I mean, that's what you, and don't forget, Gibbs did not play in that game. So now he's obviously going to play this week.
Hello, he's kind of dynamic. So speaking of voids, on the season, Goff has completed 30 or 45 passes against 6 or more rushers for passer rating of 106.7. Against the Bucs in week 6, Goff was presented with 5 or more rushers, whether in base fronts or blitzes, and he completed 16 of 16 passes on those occasions. There are more screens and some instances in which Goff would just hit the voids between the rushers and the linebackers, because when the linebackers would drop, there was always some sort of crosser or some sort of just, quick release thing right in that void. So you talked about voids. In week 6, from what I saw, that's where a lot of the voids were. The Lions were in 12 personnel on 8 of those plays, and Goff had 18 dropbacks of 12. The Bucs matched in base a lot. They played man a lot as well. So that's kind of the cat and mouse right there.
Yeah, the big question always when you play the Bucs is how many times will they blitz? Mm-hmm. When will they blitz? What kind of blitzes? How many people will they send? I mean, it's all for them. It's really about pressure. And so we'll see, I mean, the Lions will play with 6 offensive linemen as well. I mean, if they really feel that it's a potential problem, they'll put Skipper in the game, and they'll play meaningful snaps with him, and they'll have 6 offensive linemen to protect. So, this is a real interesting chess match side of the ball.
Yeah. And one player I want to mention, obviously, you know about Vita Vea. Tryon Shoyunk is good. Yaya Diaby, I believe he's a rookie, a good player.
He's a rookie from Louisville, 3rd-round pick. I loved his tape coming out of Louisville.
But one player I want to mention, I know you saw him because what he did to the Eagles, Kalijah Cansey. I love undersized defensive tackles anyway, so he was all over my radar. But that dude gave the Eagles offensive line all kinds of hell.
Yeah, he's a smaller defensive tackle, phenomenal quickness, almost plays D tackle like a running back with the way he moves.
I'm going to say, it's funny you brought that up. 47 seconds left in the 3rd quarter. Cansey did a jump cut like a running back would to get past left guard Landon Dickerson to tackle running back DeAndre Swift for no gain. He was doing jump cuts, Greg. He did one, and then he did another.
And he's also stronger. That's what I noticed watching his college tape, because immediately everybody said he's 280 pounds. He can't play, which people say things like that. And I watched his tape, and I thought to myself, he's holding up beautiful. And this is college tape I'm talking about. He's holding up fine against doubles. He's not getting moved. He's stalemating. He's winning at times. Now, again, it's college, but that's all I had at the time. And you saw him on the play that ended up being a safety, where he just drove Landon Dickerson right back into the pocket with power. So he's not just a quickness guy, even though his quickness is off the charts.
From John Randall to Aaron Donald, Greg, low man wins. Well, Cansey will play in just about every gap, and his explosiveness to and through the pocket becomes more and more noticeable the more you watch him. So, that Bucks D line. Maybe they don't have to blitz, but the Lions O line is serious. So there's another. This, I mean, I'm looking forward to this one because
That should
I
be a
think
good one.
if you haven't watched the Buccaneers, maybe you're thinking, oh, the Lions will just crush them. I don't know about that. Lions are great right now. They're cooking, but the Bucks they're in a confident place, which sometimes that'll get you a long way. Final game: Kansas City Chiefs at Buffalo Bills. As we're doing this now, Greg, on Wednesday morning, the Bills have these players listed as questionable.
Yeah, I know. Too many.
Quarterbacks Christian Benford, Rasul Douglas, and Teron Johnson. Linebackers Terrell Bernard and Tyrell Dodson. Safety Taylor Rapp and receiver Gabe Davis. That's a lot of talent and flux, especially on defense. Oh, and by the way, there might be another lake effect snow event this weekend. There is currently a travel ban in the Orchard Park area. So quite a setting for Patrick Mahomes' first road playoff game, not counting Super Bowls. So run game is important, but let's talk about the Chiefs defense again. Against the Dolphins, cornerback L'Jarius Sneed allowed a 17-yard catch from Tua to Jalen Waddle with 17 seconds left in the first half on a vertical switch release. After that, Sneed was targeted 5 times in the second half. He didn't allow a single catch. A couple of those were Tua misfires, but Sneed had incompletions thrown to A-Chain, Craycraft, Waddle, Cedric Wilson, and Tyreek Hill. He wasn't on one. He is a traveler. He was not on one side of the field. It wasn't just outside. It wasn't just slot. I'm bringing Sneed and the Chiefs secondary overall up as a primary construct of this game because when you and I have discussed the Bills offense before, one thing that comes up, and you say this with a lot of definition, they don't really have anyone who can consistently test your coverage at the intermediate and deep levels. We tend to think of Stephon Diggs as, oh, he's that explosive guy. Well, he really isn't.
He's really not.
Yeah. So that's just bringing the coverage into it versus what the Bills have on offense, even if Gabe Davis is healthy.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs they're a fun defense to watch. I mean, you know, they do a lot of different things. They play 2-man, they play cover 2, they play cover 1. They have a lot of blitz coverages that look like, in other words, when they blitz and it looks like cover 4, but the rules are totally different.
Right.
So, they have a lot of specific blitz coverages. So Spags does a really, really good job with all that, and they've got really good players. So
Yep.
they're one of the best defenses in the league, clearly.
I have said before, I don't think they'd be in the playoffs without Spags.
Yeah.
He's been the
and the Bills offense. I don't think, and again, when you have a new coordinator take over in the middle of the season, I don't think, from a tactical perspective, it's a difficult offense. I think, every once in a while they'll do some interesting things, but I think it's more of a talent execution offense. I think it's based on the fact that Josh Allen can do some special things at times and make some special throws and make some special runs. But I don't necessarily think it's a difficult offense to play against tactically.
No. In the Dolphins wildcard game, George Karlaftis was amazing. He had 2 sacks and 4 total pressures. 1 sack came against right tackle Austin Jackson, where he got him with the Von Miller long arm. And then he had a pressure at nose tackle against center Liam Eichenberg, in which Karlaftis just pushed Eichenberg into the pocket, got him running sideways, and just went bang.
Yep.
So, they got a lot of – and they're another – it's like, Edwards and Trent McDuffie, a lot of guys, their linebackers are good. A lot of guys that you don't talk about, but when they get on the field, everything's in sync, which is an endorsement of Spags, of course.
Now, there's a rematch, too, of Week 14. These teams play tough games. So, the Bills have won 3 consecutive years in Arrowhead, but, of course, then they lost playoff games, and that's what people focus on because those games, are more important. So, you mentioned the weather. I just hope they can play the game normally. That's all I care about. I just want the players to be able to play. But
if it's like 20 degrees with no wind, you just don't want one of those freezer bowl things where it's
no, and it was okay even though the Bills, they had all that snow. By the time they got to the game, the game was a game, the Bills game. So that's what you're hoping for. But well, the Bills have run the ball more and they've had success. When all said and done, this would have to be a Josh Allen game in my view. And the key thing is he didn't turn it over against the Steelers. And when they don't do that, look, sometimes a punt's not a bad thing. You play the field position game, it's okay. As long as you just you keep grinding away. The great thing about Allen is he forces you to play differently on defense. We've seen the Chiefs, when they play Josh Allen, use a spy. So that takes someone out of coverage and that takes someone out of pressure. So, he forces you to play a little bit differently at times, depending on down and distance and field location.
Right. Well, let's go back to that Week 14 game. 20-17 win for the Bills. Karlaftis, by the way, had a sack and 6 total pressures. In that game, Josh Allen completed 23 of 42 for 233 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, and a passer rating of 68.8.
Yeah, he wasn't great in that game.
Threw 4 passes of 20 or more air yards, completing 1. 25-yard pass to receiver Deontay Hardy with 53 seconds left in the first half when the Bills were already up 14-7. And on those other 3 attempts, L'Jarius Sneed had his target on lock, whether it was Stephon Diggs twice, Gabe Davis once. The most important play came with 2:10 left in the game. Allen threw a deep ball to Diggs against cover 1 from the Kansas City 22, and there was contact by both players, and no penalty was called. You just let them do what they do. But Sneed had Diggs manned up all the way downfield and boxed him out. This was another game in which Sneed worked significant snaps at both left and right corner and in the right slot. So let's go back to the Mahomes 11-yard touchdown pass to Rashee Rice. And this is one of those situations where your notes and my notes kind of meshed. This against the Dolphins, 11-10 left in the first quarter. I'll give you the floor, Greg, because there was sort of a precedent to that was pretty.
Are you talking about the play from this week?
Yeah, the Dolphins game.
Oh, okay.
Touchdown to Rashee Rice. I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Yeah.
I'm flipping games here. But so this was, I believe, Mahomes' third pass of the game. Mahomes' first pass of the game, I think, kind of set this up. And we'll put this play up when we do the video.
Yeah, this was a similar concept to the 11-yarder that he threw to Kelsey earlier in the possession. This
Right.
ended the first possession, the touchdown.
Right.
So basically what they did is they worked kind of 4 strong. I mean, Rice, as the 4th receiver, ran the shallow crosser from the backside. Long on the touchdown carried Kelsey, who was number 3 to trips, too far inside, which opened the void for Rice. It was really an easy touchdown. It was pitch and catch because of what Long did carrying Kelsey. But one of the things that the Chiefs did exceptionally well against the Dolphins, we'll see if they do it this week again. It's a different matchup. It's a different team. Is they had a ton of 4 strong pass concepts because they got a lot of zone. And they're going to get a lot of zone from the Bills. And particularly if you play cover 4 strong is almost impossible to really defend well. Now, the Bills will know this, and they'll see. 4 receivers to one side of the field against zone is hard. You just don't have enough bodies.
Well, on corners, it's harder because it's what it sounds like. Everyone's responsible for a fourth of the field, and if you got 4 against 2, I mean,
right. So you have to have your sort of backside safety play a different way. You have to have your backside underneath defender play differently. You have to adjust to that.
I really like the design of and it was a little different in that on the touchdown, Kelsey and Rice, they weren't running mesh, but they crossed over. And at the same time, the 2 outside receivers in trips right were running clear out routes with a switch release. So it was like 2 crossers, and the whole defense kind of went, we don't know what to do. It was interesting. I liked it. I liked the design.
Well, I mean, that was the play. You're talking about the touchdown. That's where Long carried Kelsey,
right.
And he just voided an entire area, and no one then carried Rice. So he just ran to an open spot.
Yeah, the Bills, we've discussed this, have also done more 4 strong since Joe Brady became their OC. Not as much as the Chiefs, but and I believe the Niners use a lot of it. Do the Packers use a lot of it? I mean, I know you have specific teams.
More and more teams are doing it because it's it's an antidote to quarters, and then more and more teams are playing quarters. So it's an antidote to the NFL cyclical from a tactical perspective, as you know.
Yep.
You've written about all this in your
we've both written books about it.
Right. So you know about all this. So it's cyclical. So now teams, for a couple of years, we heard about everybody wanting to play like Vic Fangio, start with that quarter structure and work off that. And now what's happened is, so offenses now, after a year or two, as smart coaches kind of look at this and say, okay, that posed some problems for us. So now how are we going to attack that? And one way to attack that is with 4 strong.
Cut the field in half and double the numbers advantage. Sounds pretty good.
That's what it's numbers and leverage. That's what you're trying to do, in the pass game when you're playing zone.
Yep. Well, Greg, we always have a high leverage opportunity with you as our pilot on these wonderful X's and O's talks. Looking very much forward to the divisional round, and we'll be back, gosh, next week for the conference championship previews.
Pretty amazing, huh?
Pretty
God,
amazing.
it's gone moving along, you know?
Yeah, it always races by in season and it stops, and after 2 weeks, you're like, where did it all go?
Right. No, no, it's true.
What the heck? And then we got to get into draft stuff, and we'll do all that. But Greg, as always, awesome stuff, and we'll talk more X's and O's next week.
Thanks, Doug.